Well, hello FunAhead family and friends. Guess what we're doing? Today, we are taking the engine stuff to the machine shop. Also, there are crickets in my garage. Stay tuned. All right, so like I said, along with the symphony of crickets that's going on in the background currently, we are going to be heading to my friend Elan's house in North Carolina. I'm in Ohio, he's in North Carolina. Kind of a long drive, but he is a former coworker of mine, a good friend of mine. His 9 to 5 is he's an engineer, but he also loves engine machining so much that he works part-time at an engine machine shop. So I was telling him about this Boxster S project I'm working on, and he was like, dude, bring all your stuff down, we'll knock it out, and we'll start putting the engine together. So that's exactly what we are doing. We are jumping in the old Land Cruiser, and we're gonna head on down to North Carolina and meet up with Elan's. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and shut up. We're gonna head down to Elan's. Let's do it. What's up, FunAhead fans? So we are officially here at the machine shop, as you can see in the background. It's a little noisy right now because Elan is currently in the back drying off one of the case halves that just got out of the parts washer, so apologies for the noise, but it's a very kind of loud environment here at the machine shop. So basically, the general plan of attack is going to be we are working on the case halves first. We're going to get those really nice and washed up. And then we are going to precision measure them. They are aluminum case halves, so they're not always going to be perfect, of course, but that's, you know, it's just kind of the nature of the beast. And then we are going to deck the case halves to get the mating surface with the cylinder heads very perfect. But once we do that, we're actually going to shift our focus onto the cylinder heads. We're actually going to completely take them down, take the valves out, get those really nice and seated, and then we're going to actually redeck the cylinder heads themselves, again, for the sake of perfect mating surface. And then we'll reassemble the entire cylinder heads, and those things are going to be cherry at the end of all this. So unfortunately, it's pretty loud in this environment, so I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of talking. As you can tell, it's pretty loud in the background right now. So I'll just kind of be taking footage and then doing some voiceovers as we go, and I'll maybe jump in and do some, actual talking as I'm able. Let's get right into it and start getting this thing really nice and cherry so we can have an amazing engine to go back into this Boxster. Here's actually the Bank 2 case half. We did kind of a first round through the parts washer with it, so you can see it's pretty well cleaned up. Still got some gummy going on up here. But basically, once we pull these dowel pins out, this puppy is going to be ready to be decked. We are going to do a somewhat of a hone with this material right here, AN30. You're not supposed to hone the Locasil cylinder walls because it is such a thin coating, but to be able to give the rings, the brand new piston rings, something to grab onto, we are going to use a hand hone with some felt over them with this paste, which is a mild abrasive, so that it can etch slightly, just slightly into these cylinder walls to give the new ring something to really nicely seat to. All right, so we just finished up Bank 1's hood rat hone process, as Elan called it. and if you saw the time lapse just now, then yeah, you definitely could tell that it's not the traditional method of honing cylinders, but you can see that it is a very clear difference between the two. Here's Bank 1. You can clearly see that these cylinders look really nice and some duller finish to it, which is good. Bank 2, they're very mirrory still. These are Locasil coated cylinders, and you can't hone them in a traditional sense because the Locasil is very thin. So you'll actually eat through it and there'll be not enough left. Anyway, these are good to go. We're gonna continue on with this bank, and then we're gonna deck both of these case halves, and she's good to assemble after that. Alrighty, now on to pistons. Here I am taking off the lower caps of the connecting rods to be able to remove the old bearings. And then time to remove the wristband clips and respective wrist pins, which I don't show super closely. Here we are measuring out the wrist pins to be able to get a 0 point for how much clearance there needs to be between the wrist pin and the piston and the wrist pin and the connecting rod. So here we are zeroing out the machine for the wrist pin dimension so that we can measure that clearance perfectly. And now that the bore hone is zeroed out to the exact wrist pin dimension, we can go ahead and precisely measure the tolerances between the wrist pin and the connecting rod itself. And we can do the same for the wrist pin to piston clearance as well. Now here Elan is starting to hone out the inner portion of the piston to get the clearance to the wrist pin that he desires. Now of course the piston inner dimension has not changed too much from factory, of course, but one of the main reasons he's doing this is because the wrist pin clip actually causes a minor lip on the point where it actually pushes up against the piston. So he wants to be able to kind of hone that down and have a completely smooth surface so that the wrist pin can smoothly slide in and out. And just a note here, he's literally taking off maybe 0.5 of an inch. So it is a very tiny dimension that he is honing this thing down to. And here you can see the wrist pin can very easily slide in and out. Alrighty, here Elan is polishing all of the crankshaft journals. Of course, he took very precise measurements before and after doing this to ensure that he wasn't actually removing any significant amount of material. And also the after measurements were used to give us crank to main bearing clearance and crank to connecting rod bearing clearance. Hey guys, guess what? We just got the short block fully put together, which feels very good. The short block is finished. Now we are on to completing the cylinder heads. Then we can go ahead and put them on our short block and make our short block a long block. Alrighty, now it's time for cylinder head disassembly. We'll completely reseat the valves. We're going to deck the cylinder heads and reassemble the heads. We will also be putting in new valve stem seals as well. Well, if this isn't one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, the cylinder head completely decked, ready to go on, well, not completely ready to go, obviously we need to reassemble the cylinder head, but surface-wise, this thing is completely ready to go, and what a beautiful thing it is. So one thing I wanted to mention really quick, you saw us reseating the valves. What that accomplishes is, so we reseated we ground down both the valve side and the valve seat side. And basically, this is what you're looking for on both the intake and exhaust valve. So this is a Sharpie mark right here in the middle. And by grinding the seat, you can accomplish this. You get this perfect contact patch on the valve right in the middle of this, the valve seat itself. You don't want it too high and you don't want it too low. Basically, you make this Sharpie mark, and this is the way to check it. You put the valve down in there, and then you spin it, and then you check and make sure that its contact patch is right in the middle, and all of them are for both heads and for the exhaust as well, as you can see. So these cylinder heads are going to be absolutely cherry along with the rest of this motor, which is very exciting. So now it's time to reassemble the cylinder heads, which we are going to do right now. All right, check it out. We got the final assembly on this cylinder head. Time to do a quick pressure check.
Full vacuum.
Do a quick pressure test. See what it's going to look like if it seals perfectly.
17.5.
Beautiful. Nice. Oh. It's pretty close. Nice. All right, next head.
Yeah.
Nice, good. Perfect.
Sensational.
All right, with the cylinder heads pressure checked, it's officially time to assemble the long block.
Many minutes later.
Oh, hey, what's up, FunAhead fans? So, I deeply apologize. Unfortunately, my camera's battery died at the very end of assembly yesterday before we were able to put on the other cylinder head. Anyway, we did get the long block fully assembled. As you can see, it is behind me now in the Land Cruiser, and we are on the way home back to Ohio from North Carolina. So we had a very successful trip in that we got everything machined and got it reassembled, and so now all we need to do is put all the periphery stuff back on and then put this puppy back up into the car, which obviously is easier said than done. There's you know, quite a bit of time that's going to be required in order to get this thing back up in the car and running. But we knocked out a huge step with the entire machine shop process, and we have this engine, like, man, it is a thing of beauty. We were able to measure everything on it and show that this engine, first of all, just from the get-go, is still very much within tolerance. Everything was machined very well from the factory. So a lot of the machining that we did was kind of just for thoroughness, basically, to get everything just perfect, so that when we reassemble it, we know that everything is perfect. Everything from crank to rod clearance, crank to main bearing clearance, plus the valve job, getting all the valve seats perfectly remachined, decking both the case halves and the cylinder heads so that those mating surfaces are back to being perfect, wrist pin clearance to the pistons. Basically, this engine is going to be cherry and completely ready to go. I'm very excited to get this thing back together and up in the car. But anyway, again, deep apologies that I wasn't able to actually get that super satisfying time lapse completed. But as you can see, again, it is completely back together, and we'll get plenty of more satisfying shots back at the FunAhead headquarters when we reassemble all of the auxiliary items that go on this engine. So I'm gonna call it here, and we will pick up in the next video with, like I said, reassembling and putting back on all the auxiliary stuff that needs to go on this engine. So thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning into FunAhead TV. I really appreciate you watching these videos. If you enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, and also drop a comment down below and say, hey, I'd love to chat with you. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, watching this engine transformation process go from all these individual, very dirty piece parts to fully assembled, very cleaned, well-machined long block. Let me know if you found it as satisfying as I did. But anyway, thank you all again for tuning into FunAhead TV. Like I said, I super appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Just as some quick bonus content, the guys at the machine shop recently worked on a 6.7 liter Ford diesel engine, and this is the oil that came out of it. Check this out. Yeah. They're estimating that it hadn't been changed in 100,000 miles, and clearly this was the culprit of this thing's eventual demise. Complete rebuild required.